See, I would sing some more, but because of copyright reasons, I can't. Welcome back to another video. I love kaiju movies. You love kaiju movies. Let's be honest though, everybody loves a good Godzilla film. If a Godzilla film is not in your top 5 kaiju movies, well then clearly you're doing something wrong. With that being said, today we have a very special video as we are going to be going over every Godzilla era. About a year ago, I decided, hey, I want to see every single Godzilla film. I had seen some growing up here and there. I love Godzilla, right? But I was like, you know what? I need a fresh start to this franchise. And so I watched everything, and it took me about 4 months. It was a very long process, but a very, very fun one nonetheless. Rather than do what I did with the Gundam video, which I briefly talked about every show, I'd rather just talk about the eras because I think that's more important. Because a lot of these films, yes, well, they may be different, they have similar styles, similar things going on, and so I think it's more important to talk about the overall general aesthetic of said era and how that has changed throughout the course of the franchise. So, without further ado, let's get started. Godzilla 1954 and Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956. So what is Godzilla? Well, it's an allegory for the atomic bomb, obviously. I mean, I think everybody knows that by this point. But what is Godzilla? Well, a horror film about an underwater sea monster who's awakened by an atomic bomb and is angry, which in turn causes said monster to attack. And the reason he's called Godzilla, it's because he's such a higher power. He's a god. I can talk. But as cheesy as this sounds, this film changed the course of filmmaking, of monster movies, of just movie watching, and what a monster could be in film. Like I said, it's clearly an allegory for a lot of stuff in relation to America. The atomic bomb, nuclear weapons, World War II. But on top of that, the film set the basis for what Godzilla as a character is. I mean, this design is so iconic that we still see it today. I mean, this film set up the classic Godzilla structure while also having the obligatory human drama, which people seem to love to hate unless it's really good, like Godzilla -1. We're going to talk about that later. But of course, when you have too much human drama in a really good Godzilla film, you get this. So then what happened? So this is the original film, obviously Japanese film. 2 years later, in 1956, they made an American version. And it's basically the same film, but it's re-edited to have some extra added scenes in order to include an American reporter during the events of Godzilla. And this was done so that it can fit into American audiences a little bit better, so you have a character that you understand a little bit more. It's basically the same film, extra added scenes. They've trimmed down some of the fat that the original film had, which I didn't mind all too much. And I thought it was pretty good. Obviously, Godzilla is iconic. There's nothing that can't be said about the practical effects of this franchise that doesn't make it so good, because Jesus Christ, are the visual effects phenomenal. Most Godzilla films are pretty cheesy, and obviously people know them because of their suit in the monster actor, but I think that's where the charm of this franchise really lies. Nowadays, we've seen the franchise take a different turn into more of a darker, realistic route, and that works for modern audiences. But for the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, whatever, that's the guy in the suit really worked. It has a very nostalgic feeling, and they get so smart with it, and even those suits can look scary at times. This is a great start to the franchise, which would live on to be one of the greatest franchises ever. I mean, for fuck's sake. I literally have my boy right here with me. His dorsal fins are a little bit bent. I gotta fix these. But look at him. I got this for my birthday. I love my girlfriend. You know what, we're gonna put him in the background so you can at least see him a little bit. He's chilling. Okay, but now we've moved on into the Showa Era, which lasted from 1954 to 1975. Technically, the original film is part of the Showa Era, but the original film also is part of every era, because, well, while the original film was very dark, the Showa Era is more so defined by the wackiness that is Godzilla and the humorous aspect of this is a guy in a suit, these are people dressed as monsters running around fighting each other. And in most of these films, rather than just be a monster, a mindless monster who just it kills because it's angry, Godzilla has more of a personality. In some versions, Goji's an anti-hero, but in other versions, he is a hero, and then in other versions, he's just a parent, a father, a mother, whatever. And I love this era because of the campiness. The campiness is what made this era so fun. You can look at any 1970s Godzilla film and have so much fun with it. You don't have to go in expecting a complex idea of morality. I mean, you can get that from some of them, but for the most part, they're just such fun films that you just go in and have a good time, have a good laugh. Now, these are all fair things to say about this era. That's not to say it doesn't have its problems. So the downside of this tonal shift is that it can be a very drastic viewing experience, especially when you've come out of watching later incarnations, which are a lot darker. You're going into this expecting one thing, but instead you get another. Also, Son of Godzilla is just a bad film. The suits in it are terrible. The characters suck. It just sucks overall. That's honestly the biggest con of this, is that this Godzilla has a son named Manila, and if I ever saw Manila in the street, it's on sight. I'm fucking slapping him up. Ain't that right? Yeah, see, he gets it. He'd beat his ass too. Manila is a being that I hope dies a really terrible death. I will beat the shit out of Manila. I will scare him. I'll mess him up, dude. But on the flip side, for pros of this franchise, the era also introduces Godzilla with his most famous antagonists, the characters that we still see today, such as Mothra, Ghidorah, Rodan, Angurius, who sadly doesn't really show up much anymore. He was supposed to be like the Robin to his Batman, but it just didn't work out well. You know, I had to pay some respect for my boy. He doesn't get any attention. That is just in summary what this era is defined by. There's some of the pros, some of the cons. Now, in terms of viewing experience, right, one thing I do want to talk about is some of my favorite and least favorites. With this era, some of the worst films have got to be Son of Godzilla and All Monsters Attack. And ironically enough, All Monsters Attack also utilizes footage from other films, and it's very prominent. And this is a trend that they do here and there, but it's not as common as it was here. But those two films, if they're on your list, kick them out. On the other hand, some of the best films in this era obviously include the original, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Invasion of Astro Monster, one of my favorite Godzilla movies, and Terror of Mechagodzilla. Really great films, carry over that campy vibe. And if you've seen Invasion of Astro Monster, you know it gives us this iconic dance. Can you do that? Heisei Era, 1984 to 1995. Dog, I cannot lie. This era is some of the best shit I've seen. Heisei Era to me is peak Godzilla. When you think about nostalgic Godzilla, you're thinking about Heisei Era. You wanted some darker material? You've got it. Better suits? You've got it. Great movies? Fuck it, let's throw them in there. So the first film in the Heisei Era is Return of Godzilla, and the rest of the films are basically a sequel to that. Every other film is essentially a sequel to the 1954 version. And what I mean by that is, well, Heisei kind of established, and this is a trend which we will carry on with many other incarnations, is that most Godzilla films take the original film and in some way derive from it. So think about it kind of like the original 1954 Godzilla film is a canon event that exists in every Godzilla universe. So in the case of Heisei, we've got Return of Godzilla, but obviously every film that comes after that is in universe with Return of Godzilla, but derives from the 1954 version. These films are a lot darker and they are connected to each other. While Showa Godzilla had elements that carried over from film to film, Heisei is more connected. There feels like there's more of a cohesiveness that goes with each film, especially with reoccurring characters like Mickey, who's great. She's awesome. The weird part is that it's not always perfect though, because you have actors that will return, but then you have other actors who will come back as completely different characters, like from one film to the next. So then that can also get a little bit confusing. And I mean Showa Era did this too, but I feel like it feels more prominent in the Heisei Era because we're watching more of a connected storyline. Now, with that being said, we got to go over the pros and cons. So for the cons for this era, I don't really have any. Generally speaking, human characters can be boring to watch, and that's really about it. Like a lot of Godzilla films, you're there for Godzilla. unless the human drama is so goddamn intriguing, you don't really care. And that's kind of what happens with Heisei. Sometimes it is intriguing, sometimes it's not. And if you're not having it, if you don't care about said human character, you're not really going to enjoy it. But that's not a fair argument, because that's with every Godzilla film. Now, in terms of pros, the darker tone drastically improved the films, of course, along with higher budgets, cooler designs, and sexy new Godzilla suits, man. I mean, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, Burning Godzilla. Oh my god, bro, that shit is fire, literally. But still, I mean, this era, man, they just fucking knocked it out of the park. It's so good. I mean, just look at him here, man. Just look at him. This is the fucking Cobra. Oh my god. And then don't even get me started on the posters for these films, man. Oh my god. Heisei Godzilla. They really outdid themselves with their posters, their artwork on them. Wow. So okay, so now in terms of some of the best and worst movies, so I know I was going to talk about the best and worst films, but I've kind of come to the realization, why would I tell you the worst Godzilla films? I might as well just tell you the best ones, so you can just watch that. And well, the best one for here, this era, is Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. No, I'm not lying. Okay, I'll be fair. It's not the best. It's my favorite Godzilla film. Okay. I just needed to shout it out. Just in case you wanted to watch Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Yes, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. But objectively speaking, it's got to be Godzilla vs. Biollante, Godzilla vs. Mothra, and then of course, the amazing final film that is Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, the peak pinnacle of this Heisei era, and it ends with a bang, a real one. And this era, while rather than have this piece of shit that is Manila, it has Godzilla Jr., who's actually adorable and nice, and has a character arc that is so sweet yet so sad. But at the end of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, Godzilla Jr. is attacked. He basically dies. So what does Goji do? He does the thing. He protects his son. He gives his life energy to his son, and in turn, Godzilla Jr. becomes the new Godzilla. What a way to end off the franchise. It's still continued to this day. Many are not going to consider what I'm about to say canon, and if you don't consider it canon, well, you're not a real fan. He actually shows up in a short film called Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex, which came out in 2020, and it's pretty cool. It's a little short film that's a love letter to Godzilla, and it's evident that Godzilla is Godzilla Jr. I know people are going to give like the same fucking stupid excuse. Oh, he has a different number of fingers than Godzilla did in the original film. Shut up, man. Shut up. It's narrated by the actress who plays Mickey. Just shut up. But yeah, it's a really great short film. I definitely recommend to check it out. It's available on the YouTube, on the official Godzilla YouTube channel, so go watch it. Godzilla Heisei Era is peak. I said it. Tristar 1998. So we've made it to the beginning of what tried to be the American franchise for Godzilla at the time with Tristar. And it's only one film in this era, and it's that shitty American T-Rex shit that you saw. Okay, that's kind of harsh. The design is not bad, it's just not Godzilla. And I'm glad that Final Wars decanonized his name being Godzilla and simply shortened to Zilla, because then we can separate the two characters, because this is not Godzilla. Not at all. Let me be clear, I don't hate this monster. I just think this movie sucks. I'm glad though that the TV show that came out after the film actually did something pretty fun and interesting with the character, and it's actually a really good show. Besides that though, Tristar, never make a Godzilla movie again. Millenium Era, 1994 to 2004. So now we've made it to a new era of Godzilla films produced by Toho. This time it's way less interconnected. While the suit, the actual suit itself of Godzilla does carry over, there's differences here and there, but each film, except for Tokyo SOS and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, take place in their own storyline, their own world, whatever you want the case to be. In terms of cons, in terms of pros and cons, no real complaints. I think the lack of continuity meant each film could do its own thing. This worked. I don't think it made every film as good. I would have loved to see a little bit of cohesiveness, but generally speaking, I don't mind it. I think having each film be its own separate story is fun, And it actually adds to this film, which in turn adds to the pros. More fights, more explosions, and more action, and more creative use of miniatures. Because if they destroyed this miniature, it didn't matter. They don't have to use it for the next one. They can build a separate world. And that really worked for this film, because these films would get pretty out of hand. If you've seen Final Wars, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, I lied again. I know I wasn't going to talk about the worst film, but the worst film here is also happens to be the funnest, so I have to bring it up, which is Final Wars 2004. Because this film is batshit crazy. If you want a love letter to the Godzilla franchise, but you also feel like doing a shit ton of drugs and you feel like you're gonna take over the world, this film's for you. This film is filled with Earth getting invaded by aliens, super powered beings, fucking explosions every 5 seconds, a military general with a katana. Gosh, then you can have that. Oh, and on top of that, you get Zilla getting killed by Godzilla. What more is there to have? Even Manila's in the film. But yeah, I mean, Final Wars was supposed to be the final goodbye for Godzilla, and for a time it was. We wouldn't see Godzilla up until 2014, so there was a 10-year difference, right? Rather than one coming out every couple of years. And they went out with a bang. They threw almost every Godzilla character they knew in this film, and they had them all fight, and it was fun. Now, with that being said, objectively speaking, the best film in this era has got to be Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. It's not just a great Godzilla film, it's also got a great human aspect to it, and I think the human aspect really adds to it, because in this case the humans control Mechagodzilla, so therefore they are the duo antagonists, right? And it works for this film, and the set design is just so great, the material is great, it's a spectacular film to watch. Tokyo SOS is the only sequel that exists in this era, and while it's not as good as the first film, it's still a great film on its own. And they both go great together. They go hand to hand. I would love rewatching these two films, and I think they're probably the most rewatchable Godzilla films because their stories are so concrete within the film. Monsterverse 2014. Let me be honest. If you're watching this video right now, you've definitely seen one of the films in the Monsterverse, right? Because what ended up happening is Legendary was able to acquire the rights for Godzilla once again after Tristar unfortunately ruined those rights. And so they came out with their Godzilla 2014 film, and it's still continuing today with Monarch and Godzilla x Kong, right? That's enough said about that, because there isn't really much to say. I think you know what these films are about. You've seen them. They're fun monster films. They are interconnected with each other for sure. In terms of cons though, I will say that the biggest weight holding these movies down is the human characters. I think Godzilla King of the Monsters, no, not the original one, this one, is a great film if it didn't have as many human characters in it. Let's be honest here. Millie Bobby Brown got a little too much screen time when we wanted to see more of Ghidorah and Godzilla. Now that doesn't undermine those aspects of the movie. It just like it doesn't help with the viewing experience, right? And the crazy part is you can do human characters right. We've seen it with Monarch, Kong Skull Island. I mean, that film has some of the best human characters. It's so intriguing. King of the Monsters needed a little bit more cohesive writing. I mean, I'm glad that Godzilla x Kong focused more on the monsters aspect, less on the humans. The humans were mostly there just to narrate the story, and so that we have a perspective on what's going on, and that's fine. I don't care. Let's keep it that way. Also, I'm still waiting on Godzilla versus Space Godzilla in the Monsterverse. One day. But in terms of pros, amazing visual effects, of course, great CGI, pretty decent stories, spectacles, you know, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Especially, like I mentioned, as we are starting to see more and more of these films, there's less human characters, and if there are human characters, at least their stories are more interesting, which is fine. That's fun. Let's keep it that way. Let's write better stories. And if you've noticed, these films are starting to go into a campier direction. I think Godzilla x Kong was the first step into that, into this more Showa Era-like era of the Monsterverse, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it, because if you want to see dark, gritty storytelling, that's what Toho's for. We're going to bring them up in just a second. While the worst is hard to say, as I feel like they're objectively all pretty good films, it's gotta be Godzilla 2014, which is a pretty high bar. But seriously, everything after that film just got better and better, so I think I've got to put it down there. But the best film is either Kong Skull Island, which just is a great film overall, or Godzilla x Kong. It's a fun film, let's be fair. It's not the best movie, but it's a great Godzilla movie. Okay, now we've made it to the Reiwa Era, which is technically Toho's newest and current era of Godzilla. America has the Monsterverse. Toho has also been pumping out films, which are most all independent from one another. But yeah, this is known as the Reiwa Era. It's a little bit more disorganized since each story is doing its own thing. This includes like stuff like Shin Godzilla, Godzilla -1, the various Godzilla short films on their YouTube channel, and of course the Netflix Godzilla movie trilogy. And like I said, if you think that Gemstone Godzilla is not Godzilla Jr., you're crazy. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. What I find interestingly enough about this franchise though is that most stories are their own independent teams creating said stories, and it's good and bad. Obviously there is no cohesiveness really with this era, but that's okay though, because if one thing works, we're gonna get more of that. As you've probably heard with Godzilla -1, the sequel got announced, so maybe there will be more cohesiveness now. And obviously I love Godzilla -1. I just can't wait for it to see where the franchise goes. But the worst in this are sadly the anime movies. I enjoyed them conceptually speaking. I just don't think the execution was all that good. There was a lot of potential, a lot of fun they could have had with them. They didn't really do the most with them because they, guess what, focused on the humans. And you would think that for an animated movie they would focus on Godzilla, but no, humans are still first and foremost. The best, of course, is first of all Shin Godzilla, written by my daddy Hideaki Anno, and who directed Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, and of course Evangelion. You know who this guy is. He's the fucking GOAT. And Godzilla -1, which finally does human characters so well. It is the best human drama we've seen in any Godzilla film, and it's taken the franchise into a new direction. We've finally gone back to the darker, grittier era, and unlike many of the other Godzilla films, it doesn't derive from the 1954 version, which is really exciting to see. It's got its own lore, its own world, and it's a really fun new take on the franchise. But if you want to hear more about my thoughts on that, go check out that video. Yeah, I gotta plug myself. So all in all, that was the Godzilla franchise, all the eras. While Godzilla may have started out as an allegory for nuclear weapons, the atomic bombings, and things like that, the franchise, it's much more than that. It's becoming a not just an iconic part of film history, but an iconic part of media in general. And it's also just fun films to watch. There's everything here. If you want something darker, you can watch Return of Godzilla. But if you want something lighthearted, you can just turn on your Invasion of Astro Monsters. I think what makes this franchise work is that it's been around for so long that there's a little bit of everything. There's something for everybody here. That's the fun of Godzilla. There's so much variety to the franchise. To some, he's a monster. To others, he's a hero. To others, he's an anti-hero. And to others, he's just a family guy, just trying to take care of his family. But to me, he's just a king. He was a huge part of my franchise, and I can't wait to see where we keep going from here, how these movies keep evolving and changing. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be working on those films. Who knows, maybe I'll be directing a Godzilla film. And if I am, well, then you're probably watching this and thinking, wow, he really did it. And if I'm not, then you're probably watching this and thinking, wow, he did not do it, he sucks. Yeah, I know. But check out any and all Godzilla films. If you Google them, a lot of them are actually available on free streaming services. They're mostly readily available, so that's fun. But if you watched any Godzilla films or have your thoughts, opinions, favorites, let me know down in the comments below. I love reading what you guys are saying. And as per usual, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch me talk about Godzilla. Yeah, that guy over there. Who knows? Maybe we've all got a Godzilla inside each and every one of us. That sounded kind of odd. Yeah. Until next time, see you, Space Cowboys. And until next time, see you, Space Cowboys.